Go.
Hello, Lori. We're here with Queen LJ. We're doing the first hive update. This was one of the hives that we were up a couple weeks ago and we were making splits, and we weren't sure how good she was going to be, but after a couple frames she's looking like a pretty good queen. This is what you'd call a typical frame for bees. What they have is honey capped on the outside edge, and then there's a bunch of little baby bees developing here in this section right here. I don't know if the camera can quite pick them up, but there's little worms and they're floating in what we call royal jelly, which is what the bees feed the queen, but every bee gets a little bit, and it's just pretty much food for the bees to sit and eat and develop and grow. But if I go to the next frame here, I can show you what we look for in a good queen.
Did you hear something back there again?
Huh?
Did you hear something back there again?
Something keeps cracking. So this is a frame of sealed brood, and one of the things we look for is how close of a pattern the queen has. If you look, there's like no or hardly any empty cells here, and that's a sign of a really good queen. That means that she's well mated, that she's got a lot of eggs, and she's laying a lot of eggs everywhere. If this had like a lot of spots open, then we'd be concerned that it's not so good of a queen. And some of the packages that we got, the bees kind of flocked to one queen or another. This one was really small because we ended up not splitting, taking any brood out of this one last time.
It wasn't small.
It was not as big as Hive 12, and just within the last couple weeks this hive's really grown a lot, so that is a sign of a pretty good queen. We are going to only keep a few of the queens from the original hive, from the original packages, and so far I'd say she's probably going to be one of them. So when we do the hive updates or the hive inspections, what we're looking for is just how good of a queen there is, how much honey they have, how much pollen they have. And if we can, we'll try to find the queen. And we've been trying to mark them all too. But this is a really calm hive, which is another thing we like to have. When you have bees buzzing around you all the time and stinging you, it makes for a rather unpleasant hive inspection. But these guys are just pretty calm and let me do what I want to do. So the next thing I'd be worried about with this hive is that they might try to swarm on us.
Which is a really good segue to the queen cup on the back of that frame there.
Well, there was nothing in it yet. So this is what we'd call a queen cup. The bees will develop these all over.
Josh is holding that upside down right now.
Right, it was the other way. So that's the beginning of what would be a queen cell. For whatever reason, the bees will make queen cups all over, I think just in anticipation that they might have to make a queen at some point. A lot of them just stay unfilled. Some of them then will eventually become a new queen cell, but that one didn't have anything in it. When we get concerned is if there's a larva in there and it's full of royal jelly, it means that they're either have swarmed or they're about to swarm relatively quickly. So we look for those too. And this is what the bees start out with. This is an empty frame, just a wooden frame with a piece of plastic. We use different types of foundation in our hives. This one is plastic, and it has the imprint of the comb.
It's coated with wax, and yep. It makes for a really sturdy frame. They don't fall apart when you're taking it in and out. But the bees really like the wax, just plain wax foundation to draw out, which is why that plastic one isn't drawn out yet. They just don't seem to like it quite as much.
So this top box has a lot of honey already in it, and when the bees start getting a lot of honey in their hive, we say they get honey bound, meaning the queen runs out of places to lay eggs. and that's another cue that they're going to swarm. This is drone brood here. Sometimes if the boxes aren't quite lined up right, or there's a little
bit of
extra gap,
space, they'll build some wax in there.
Yeah. So these are the male bees, which they don't do any pollination or nectar collecting. Their main job is just to mate with the queen. So we don't get too concerned about these. We don't want to, of course, kill all the drones, but that's pretty common that they do that in those spaces. So here's just another frame of honey that they have. So we don't have to always inspect every frame. These I can see there's just a lot of honey in them. This was, here's a good thing to show. So this was a queen cell, and I don't know how old it is. I think it's probably from last year, but this is where they had made a queen, and they queen hatch. They'll break them back down then sometimes.
The hive only usually likes to have one queen, so if they feel like they're going to start swarming, they'll usually make a lot of queen cells. But the first queen to hatch, not always, but usually will go sting the other queen cells.
And on this frame then we have a bunch of eggs.
Oh, that'll never show up with
Yeah,
that white wax.
this is a new frame of wax that they have, so it makes it really hard to see the eggs. What the eggs look like is just a little, it almost looks like a grain of rice.
A very small
Yeah.
grain of rice.
So since there's eggs on this one, there's a higher likelihood that the queen was on this frame here relatively recently, within the last 3 days. So we really start looking at these frames like this where we see open space, a lot of open space in the eggs.
The queen will walk around a frame, and a good queen will lay an egg in almost every single one of those cells. She'll leave kind of a ring of honey and maybe pollen and some drone brood around the outside of the frame, and the center will be filled with worker brood. And after she lays an egg, it'll stay an egg for about 3 days, then it turns into a little larva. The nurse bees will feed it honey, pollen, and all the worker bees get a little bit of royal jelly. The queen gets more. And after about 16 days, I think it is, the larva will spin a cocoon, and then it's capped brood. And then about a week after that, a bee will chew its way out of the cell, and they'll clean it up, and the queen will come through and lay another egg in it. So from start to finish, is it 21 days for a worker?
21 days for a worker, yeah.
So it takes 3 weeks to raise a bee from an egg to a worker bee. And in the summer, the bees work really hard. They can actually work themselves to death in about 6 weeks just from so much work and so much flying. So it's really important to have a good queen that can keep laying eggs so that the population continues to grow.
Right, if the queen can't keep up with the needs of the hive.
Queen cup on there.
What?
There's another queen cup.
Oh. So this again here, there's just a little extra space, and they had a bunch of drone brood. This hive here, we got to make up some more hives, and this one here is just perfect for splitting this next time. There are a lot of bees in here now, and with a pattern like that, you can see she's doing an excellent job now. This hive, when you have a queen that's laying this good of a job, this hive will really expand very quickly, and this all 3 boxes will be right full of bees here probably in a few weeks. So she's doing a really good job.
You can see, where's the ones with the pollen in the baskets? There's one. You can see on the back legs that bee has bright yellow blobs of pollen. Those are pollen baskets on her back legs. So she'll come and drop those in a cell, and then she'll pack it in there with her head. They'll mix it with a little bit of honey, and that's their protein source.
Yep, so the bees will collect two different things. They collect nectar as a carbohydrate source, and then pollen is their fat and protein. Without any pollen, the bees have a hard time raising young bees. So that early pollen is always very critical for the survival of a beehive early in the spring.
Right, they've gone all winter and sometimes their stores are really low and they need that pollen to begin building up so that they can increase the population and gather enough honey for the upcoming season. So the dandelions in spring are a really important thing for the bees to be able to get started and build up.
Yeah, she's just doing an excellent job in here.
I feel like they're building an awful lot of these.
We did find one hive that we were inspected today that had, it looked like the signs of varroa mite, so we're going to get some treatment. And so we're going to be back up here pretty soon. And I think this hive here is definitely going to be wanting to swarm very soon. So we're probably going to split this one here next week, I think. We were just watching a video from last year, the swarms we were catching, and that was in mid-August. I don't want to do that again. We were fortunate enough that we were here on the right day and came out to check on the bees. You know, they're up north. They're not close to our home. We're about an hour and a half away from the bees now. And it was just luck of the draw that we came out and there was 3 swarms just hanging on bees or on trees. And had it been a day before or a day earlier or later, we would have missed out on 3 swarms of bees.
So basically when the bees keep building up, they're gathering more nectar and they're gathering more pollen, and eventually they're going to run out of places to put stuff. And that high population and that kind of being cramped and the queen doesn't have enough open cells to keep laying a whole lot of eggs signals to them that it's time to swarm. So the old queen and about half of the bees will all fly out of the hive. It seems like it almost always happens around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it'll just be this huge cloud of bees, and they'll end up making a little ball on a tree branch. They'll stay there for a few hours or a day while scout bees fly back and forth looking for a place to build a new hive that's suitable. And once they find somewhere and they come back and communicate that, the whole swarm of bees will just fly off. And sometimes they go in a tree, sometimes they go in an empty bee box, sometimes they go in people's houses. So once they go, they're gone. You want to try to manage so that you don't lose any.
And they actually have quite a bit of room here yet to expand, so I don't think we have to worry about it too much.
Maybe could rotate those boxes.
Yeah. I think this is one of the frames that kept us from splitting her the last time. So this looks spottier than what we'd like, but it could have been just from moving them. Maybe they got like a little bit off to a weird start for moving them. But she's definitely doing a pretty good job. There's a lot of bees in here that we can split and make another hive with.